I'm tickled pink to be talking about the new National Dental Practice-Based Research Network and one particular study that we did last year. The reason I'm so excited is that finally we are in a new era of oral health research. I say that because the old model was that we had ivory tower academics, like that would be me, up at the front of the room, magnanimously handing down knowledge and having clinicians eagerly lapping up that knowledge. Well, that old model, the problem is it's not only a bit patronizing, it also doesn't work. Okay? The new model of oral health research that we're in actually levels the playing field. Gee, wouldn't it be great if we actually had the end user involved in the process? In this case, the end user is the practitioner and the patients. What if they actually help participate at every step of the process? Might that be a better way? The answer is a resounding yes, and we've demonstrated that. We even have really a new era of oral health research funding because now agencies like the National Institutes of Health, which has funded our work, make a point of involving patients in the scientific process in some way and other end users. So let me speak in hyperbole. Let's say the Gates Foundation wanted to fund some really innovative way of technological end user gadget. Okay? Do you really think that they would put out a request for applications and get all these great software engineers to put in applications, to have these applications reviewed by other software engineers, to rank all these applications and say, well, gee, these are all great, but we'll fund the top 3. The software engineers just do this great work. They publish this great work unless they have negative findings, but let's say it's positive findings and it ends up in a great software engineer journal, and then it sits on a shelf. They wonder why this knowledge isn't being used, and they actually approach the end user, and then they have this moment, well, the end user says, well, that's not how I work. I mean, this won't work. So we've had all this tremendous effort, money, and energy into generating knowledge that's just not going to be used. So that's why it's so important in this PBRN research context to involve the end user. That would be the practitioners and the patients. In the dental world, the PBRNs really got up and going in 2005. The medical PBRNs have been around since the 1970s, but they've continued to grow in number. But in the dental world, the National Institute of Dental Craniofacial Research, I think almost everyone in this room knows that they're part of the National Institutes of Health, which is the main funder of biomedical research in the U.S. They funded this initiative in 2005, and it actually took a lot of courage on their part because they were really sticking their neck out. There were many naysayers back in 2005 who said, oh, this concept just will never work. But they did it anyway, and it has worked. In 2012, they issued another initiative. I wouldn't say that one involved courage, but I would say it involved vision. The vision was a unified single national network. So here is what I was asked to project for continuing education purposes. First, the objectives for today will be to understand the unique value that the practice-based research network context can make to oral health care delivery, and to understand the unprecedented opportunity made possible by the National Dental PBRN. So I really believe that the NIDCR has created an unprecedented, perhaps once-in-a-generation opportunity to change oral health research by involving the end user in such a systematic way. And then the last objective will be to understand the extent to which dentists are currently delegated expanded functions as compared to what they're already allowed to do by law. So let's first talk about the PBRN part. Let's get everyone on the same page. A PBRN is just simply a group of dental practices that's affiliated to investigate research questions and to engage in sharing experiences and expertise. So before the dental PBRN era, there's an immense amount of practical clinical wisdom out in the community that before this era was essentially largely ignored. And when we interact very closely with practitioners, and let me give an example of in the metro Birmingham area, one of our practitioners practices there as a former U.S. Steel era town, economically depressed. He's fully committed to those populations. He knows that population well. He graduated first in his class. He could have done anything he really wanted to do in dentistry, but he chose to do that. That is just an example of the immense amount of practical clinical wisdom that is out in the community. Shouldn't we engage that? The network conducts research that is done in and about the real world of daily clinical practice, where just about everyone gets their care. So if we are wanting to understand how things really work, then why not do research in that same context where almost everything is being done? Research contexts exist on a continuum. At one end of the continuum, well, that's barely visible. Okay. At one end of the continuum is laboratory research. So this is in vitro research, animal type research. This is the place to do research if your intervention is not ready for humans. Do it in the laboratory research context. The other end, moving farther up the spectrum, clinical trials in academic settings. This is a great place to do efficacy research, and by that I mean let's find out if something can work under ideal conditions. And this is the place to do research if you have an intervention that's not ready for patients. It's at least ready for humans, but it's not ready for patients. The next step up is practice-based research, PBRNs. This is where you do research when the intervention is not ready for practices. And then finally, community-based research when you have an intervention that's not ready for communities. The key take-home message here is that every single one of these research contexts have major strengths, and every single one has significant limitations. So whenever I'm in an audience and someone's up the front and talks about clinical trials, randomized clinical trials done in academic clinical settings being the, quote, gold standard, I will often raise my hand and say, well, would you mind calling it the bronze standard or the tarnished gold standard? And I say that because that context also has limitations. So all of these contexts have really important strengths. None of them are gold standards. They all have something very important to offer moving a research agenda forward. Sometimes things can be very rigorous but not relevant. Here's Frank and Ernest. They are rigorously adding up time and temperature and they get 1227, but who cares? Okay? And this is the complaint sometimes levied against randomized trials done in academic settings. Some have referred to it as clinical research that is clinically irrelevant. Okay? They will say that typically because the practitioners doing this research are specialists and probably subspecialists and probably have a lot of very specialized training that they're doing this treatment for this trial on. They probably do not have a lot of financial or other constraints put on them while they're doing this treatment like real-world dental care providers do. They probably, as part of the protocol, are obligated to hone down the patient eligibility criteria to the point where the patients who actually get entered into this trial may be aberrant with respect to the patients at large in the dental care system at large. So sometimes you have clinicians attending these type results presentations, and they'll go away wondering, well, what does this really mean for my practice? I don't, you know, I'm a general dentist out in the hinterlands. I'm operating under all these constraints. I don't have the luxury of selecting out patients. If the patient comes to me with a problem, I'm going to try to fix it in some way. I need to do something. Okay, so there will often be a complaint that yes, this is a scientifically done trial, but does it really have relevance to me? So this is the value, the power of having the end user help direct the research agenda so that not only the types of studies done, but the topics that are ultimately done and the results that are presented would have meaning to people who would actually use this knowledge. The latest research shows that we really should do something with all this research. So we've had a tremendous knowledge explosion, but if this knowledge sits on the shelf and doesn't get used, then what value is it? So there's nothing intrinsically good about knowledge, nothing intrinsically good about research. What's intrinsically good is improving the health of the population, and this knowledge is only a means to an end to make that happen. Academic types need to be reminded of that occasionally. Okay? The goal that we're looking for is to improve the health of the population. This knowledge that we generate needs to be linked to that improvement in some way. Larry Green is at UC San Francisco. He has a great line: if we want more evidence-based practice, we need more practice-based evidence. And what he's saying is that if we want to improve clinical practice, let's conduct this research in that context where care is being delivered. So collaborate or die. In this case, collaborate with the practitioners and their patients in these settings, in the entire research process, and the odds are your end product will be more useful to them. There's also the notion that, gee, if we can do a lot of studies and generate knowledge, but what if this knowledge doesn't get implemented? Maybe the studies themselves are indeed very applicable to that routine clinical practice, but for whatever reason, they're not getting implemented. And so this author makes the case that, gee, we could accomplish a lot more if we put the brakes on some things and stop the next innovation, but just use the knowledge that we already have and make sure that gets moved into practice. So oftentimes I will refer to this as two sides of the same coin for PBRN research. On one side of the coin is knowledge generation, doing effectiveness studies. So doing studies to determine what works best, for whom, and when. But the other side of the coin is dissemination and implementation type studies. So on that side of the coin, we start with the standpoint that, okay, we actually do have effectiveness. We know what works, or think we do, but why isn't it being implemented? Okay, so that's the other side of the coin. And to effectively move forward a PBRN research agenda, we really need to be thinking about both sides of the coin at the same time. Here's poor Bill Murray. I could envision him let's see, wrong way. I could envision him as representing a clinician who's exhausted from trying to find evidence. If he does find it, then he's kind of bewildered by it, or perhaps he wonders about the relevance of all this information to his practice. So we often talk about a gap between research and practice, so a research to practice gap. But it's not really one gap, it's three gaps, and that's where the point this slide makes. This one gap is three gaps that's broken down into a knowledge gap, a knowing gap, and a knowing to doing gap. The knowledge gap is when we don't have the evidence to support something. So we need to generate that knowledge. That's that one side of the coin I was talking about earlier. So we can eliminate a knowledge gap by doing the proper studies, typically effectiveness studies, to demonstrate that something does work, and when, and for whom. But there are two other gaps. One is a knowing gap. This is essentially a dissemination gap. So we have the knowledge, the studies have been done, the evidence is there, but the clinicians in routine clinical practice aren't aware of it. So there's this gap in knowing. Either the results or the evidence haven't been disseminated adequately, or if they have been disseminated, they just don't know about it for whatever reason. But there's an additional gap, a knowing to doing gap. This is an implementation gap. So in this gap, the clinician actually knows about the evidence. There's no lack of awareness, but he or she is not actually doing it in routine clinical practice. So there's this gap between knowing it and actually doing it. This is an implementation gap. In 2005, NIDCR funded 3 regional PBRNs. One was the Northwest Precedent Network based in Seattle and Portland. There was another regional network called the Dental PBRN based in Birmingham, Alabama. Another network called the Pearl Network based in New York. And so in 2005, the Institute funded these 3 regional networks for a 7-year period. And there was a tremendous number of skeptics back in 2005. I don't think we have those anymore because we've demonstrated the power of the concept. But they asked back then, would we be able to recruit a large number of practitioners? Would we really be able to establish the necessary regulatory and contractual relationships with these practitioners? Would these busy clinicians really be effective at doing studies in their practices? Would they really contribute ideas for research studies? Would they participate at every step of the process? So that was back in 2005. By 2012, it was clear that the answer to all these questions was a resounding yes. So, because of that, in 2011, the NIDCR put out a request for applications such that in 2012, which began April of this year, we began a new era of National Dental PBRN. It's a single, unified national network. So there are no longer 3 regional PBRNs. They've been unified into a single national network. And the Institute also funded this network for an additional 7-year period. Now, in NIH, typical pattern is to fund a grant for 3 years, perhaps 5. 7 is pretty rare. But now they've done it for 2 consecutive 7-year periods. So this is the logo for the network. The network is about, with, and for practitioner investigators and their patients. So it's about practitioners because we are interested in how they change routine clinical practice, if at all, and why. It is with practitioner investigators and their patients because we make a point of involving them at every step of the process. It is for practitioners and their patients because the end results of these studies, we want them to be a benefit to the practices and improve the quality of the care, how they go about delivering care. We refer to all this as practical science. So this is not stuff that ivory tower academics dream up. This is practical science because the results of these studies should be immediately applicable into routine practice. The new national network is structured as 6 different regions, and here are the regional sites. The national administrative site is at Birmingham. So what we've demonstrated is that practitioners really will participate at every step of the process, and they will do quite well, thank you. They will generate ideas for studies. They will participate in developing study design. They will participate in designing data collection forms. We've made substantial changes in data collection forms as a result of their input. They will participate in feasibility testing and pilot testing. They will participate in data collection, data analysis in concert with statisticians. They will present locally, regionally, nationally. They will also participate in manuscript preparation. And again, they've done very well. There are many benefits that practitioners tell about in participation. So these next 3 or 4 slides are benefits that they themselves have reported to us. These are not benefits that we've dreamed up. They tell us that projects contribute to the improved quality of dental care by contributing to the scientific basis for the dental procedures that are their focus. Okay? So they feel like as a result of participating in this, they're actually improving the quality of care. So one of the notions about PBRN research is really the overlap in the Venn diagram between research and quality improvement. They report to us that it expands the vision for patient care by including a formalized research and quality improvement component. So the typical practice does care only. Well, what if they incorporated a research component into their practice? And they say that they report to us that this is a benefit to their practice to do this. They also tell us that it provides a focus for clinical excellence because it allows them to devote attention to one particular area of practice at a time. It's not uncommon for practitioners to tell us, gee, before I participated in this study, I really hadn't thought about this since dental school, or I hadn't really thought about this since that continuing education course that I took 10 years ago. So they report to us that this provides a focused attention. They start to think about this area of their practice, and then they love engaging other practitioners about the results from that study. They tell us also that it can improve the logistics of their daily clinical operations. Every study has a very specific protocol, but we have research assistants go out into the practices for a training session with each practice, and they try to customize that particular protocol to a particular practice. So, for example, they address, well, where do we start to inform the patient about this study? Who exactly is going to do the informed consent? Is it going to be only the dentist? Is it going to involve other people? Where will the data collection happen? Will it all happen in the dental operatory, or will some of it begin to happen out at the reception area or some other place in the dental practice? And they tell us that thinking through that process can actually help them improve their daily operations. An important concept to our practitioners is that they are the ones who decide what studies are done and what treatment is done, not third parties. That's a very common theme for a lot of our practitioners. They want the network to be perceived as free of any conflict of interest, free of any influence from outside third parties. They tell us also that it enhances communication with patients by showing that the practitioner cares about the scientific basis of clinical practice. So it's common for patients to tell us that they like the fact that their dentist participates in the network because it means that he or she obviously is trying to, quote, stay current. So if they're participating in this network, then I know that my dentist is trying to stay current, and they view that as a very positive thing. Some practitioners have told us that it actually can serve as a team builder because they make a point of engaging the staff in this research project. It also allows the practitioner to see what is effective in their practices and compare that to other practices using anonymously presented results. So a typical scenario is that we have annual meetings of our practitioners in each of the regions. Oftentimes, part of the meeting will focus in on results from a particular study. Typically, many of the attendees will have participated in that study. And before the meeting, they will have results from their particular practice to look at. They find that very interesting. They find it very interesting to compare the results of their practices to other practices in their region and then practices throughout the network. It also provides an opportunity for them to present at local, state, and national dental and research conferences. Again, they've done very well. They tell us that participation in the network can help distinguish their practice from other practices, acting as a practice promoter or practice builder. So what they're saying is that their participation helps their practice stand out from the crowd amongst the rest. They also tell us that it increases the practice's visibility and stature among dental patients. It provides venue for collegial interaction. I mentioned the annual meetings. Oftentimes practitioners, particularly the solo practitioners, tell us that they have a sense of professional isolation, and so they like to get together and talk shop, particularly when it's discussing results from studies that they themselves have participated in. Practitioners are compensated for the time it takes them to do the research. They're not being compensated for the care they're providing. They're being compensated for the time it takes to do the research study. So that means the time it takes to do the informed consent, filling out data collection forms, training, that sort of thing. They also receive continuing education credit for attendance at the meetings and other activities. And then we provide certificates suitable for framing, and some of them put them out in their waiting room, for example. Here is the website for the National Network. I encourage you to visit it. We put a lot of details on there.